What's up? How you doing?
Hey, buddy.
Dude, I'm so happy that I got you on. I wanted to get you on literally since I started doing this in July. Um, because when it comes to long, meandering, fun, long form conversations that have no goal or purpose other than just to be entertaining and, I mean, I think that one of the things one of the biggest compliments my friends ever give me when they listen to the podcast is I feel like I'm listening to a wiretap of your phone calls, and like all your like conversations with
Right.
your buddies. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm going for. And then I was thinking just about like who would talk to. I was like, who would be so great at this? And obviously, I mean, we have what, couple dozen, cigar
Yeah, for
sessions,
sure.
cigar and drinking
Yeah,
and
for
tequila
hours
sessions.
over cigars and great booze.
Yeah, seriously, dude. Seriously. So first of all, I miss you. I miss hanging out. I miss hanging out with you.
I miss you
But
too, man.
what's been going on? What's been happening the last I last saw you probably April time because I was that because right after Pesach, I moved to. I don't even know if you were around for the holiday, and right after that I moved to Orlando. I don't think I saw you since then.
No, you
So
didn't. That was when we lost touch.
it's
I
almost
mean,
6 months ago.
we've been in touch. We've been in
Yeah.
touch, but we haven't hung out. So I yeah. So I mean, you know what happened with my son Yosef and him going to Israel and for yeshiva and wanting to join the army, and he's in a Hesder program. And so, like when we went over Hanukkah, it was it was after October 7th, and that had a huge impact on the entire Jewish world and on us, included and in particular, because when we went to when we went to visit him, we spent a week in Jerusalem and then a week in Eilat, and we just got to really understand why why people make Aliyah. Like I never really like it was always on my radar, it was always on Gisella's radar. I mean, she when we got married, she was like, we will be going to Israel at some point. She was just,
She said that,
it was
really.
it was not even a question for her. I mean, yeah, she's wanted a place in the old city since the first time she did the JWRP, the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project, as an interpreter with Lori Palatnik, like 20 something years ago. She's wanted to live in the old city, and I said no to that. I drew a line at
Really,
the
I
old
love
city.
that. I mean, I know there's going to be a bajillion pros and cons to living in the old city,
Yeah.
and I bet that a very calculated and measured person. I think you need to be like emotionally invested to like actively choose to live in the old city because
Well,
I
anybody who
think
I
there are a
talked
lot
to
of
who lived in
cons.
the old city wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Hmm.
I mean, there is, and the truth is, I go to the old city every single day. I learn at the Aish Torah World Center.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, and I daven at the Kotel almost every morning. Like I'm there all the time, 2, 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy right now because we rented a place in on Ben Yehuda Street, which is like,
Sure.
a 20-minute walk from the Kotel. But it's actually I did it in 16 minutes today. I was so proud of myself because
That's
I was
great.
like, I was hustling. But we're buying a place that's further
are
away.
you desensitized to it but because you're spending so much time there? Like to the like the are you desensitized to the history and like the
So
energy?
so yes and no. I would say that when you first arrive, you have this incredible sense of awe and yiras shamayim that honestly never leaves you. You have
Yeah.
that for the entire time, but that sense of newness that comes with, that there's like it's almost like you mature together. You become you have the group of guys that you're going to meet there and daven with.
So you said you mature together in what?
You mature together with the kotel.
Okay.
Like you are, you know, it's eternal. I mean, it's going to be there forever, and you just feel like you're becoming part of the, the system. And that's not to say that it becomes that it's a bad thing in any way. I mean, I feel in some ways closer than I did, because I know when I have something specific to daven for, like I know that I can feel God's presence closer at the Kotel than I can in other places.
Right.
And
What do you
and I,
when you say that? When you say that, what do you feel? Can you try to articulate that?
it's a hard one.
I
Um,
know, I know, but
what do I?
I'm not. I because I think that that means that term means a lot to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, you know.
Yeah,
And what we do know is that the human experience, especially especially something that is perceived through the lens of each subjective personal experience. um, Sometimes it's unique and sometimes it's kind of shared, and like there's a common shared experience that people have. What can you try to articulate what that closeness is and what that feeling is?
so I have. It's easier for me to find and keep kavana when I'm standing in front of the Kotel, and
Okay.
all you have to do is like it helps to be um, like historically present, to know that, to know the history of the Jewish people, and to have been, I mean, I like, I you know me, I'm well read, and so I love the history. I'm a total nerd when it comes to, like, I buy tour books and I and I read them for
So
fun.
much fun.
And
Yeah.
so I I really feel like, because I can look up, I open my eyes during davening, and I'm not seeing the inside of a shul, I'm not seeing the inside of my house or a sitter. There's the holy, the Temple Mount.
Right.
It's right there in front of me. That sense of intelligence that comes with that, the knowledge that comes with all the history,
Hmm.
helps me from like a whatever. If I'm being metacognitive here, just thinking about how I think, I honestly, I think it's from a historical perspective that I feel God.
Right.
I don't
That's what
know.
I was.
I don't know
That's
if
what I
it's
wanted to know.
closer.
By the way, that's what I wanted to know, because there's some people that feel the more emotional attachment, and then like there's also like the feeling of like a grand culmination of like centuries and thousands of years, millennia, just of just sacrifices and dying, and people dying literally and emotionally to come back to this place, and to stand at the foot of it after so long yourself, and this is your life now. I
That's
mean,
that's
like,
what it is. That's what it is for me. I don't know if that's right or wrong or better or worse than having an emotional connection. I know that God is as close to me here, sitting on my bed in my apartment, as He is to me sitting at the Kotel. He's not any closer there than here, because He's eternal and He's everywhere and infinite. But but for me, it's the sense of presence, the sense of the knowledge of the weight of the millennia, and
yeah,
all the people who have really sacrificed to get us to this point where we're on the cusp of Mashiach. I mean, everyone says it. I feel it. Gog and Magog. Who knows what's going on? I mean, there are rockets going off in the
so,
north
so
as we speak.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I always get very skeptical, just in general, when we say things like, I feel Messiah, I feel redemption, I feel Mashiach,
Yeah, yeah, me
because
too.
because historically, it's always culminated in some massive sense of tragedy,
Yeah,
whether there was someone that took advantage of people's hope, or someone that falsely created people's hope, or that people's hope really existed and we were really close to some kind of form of redemption that just got screwed up one way or another. That I'm almost, I, and maybe I'm jaded and I'm a little more skeptical, But the way that I generally try to go about it is to be hopeful and
Yeah.
to wait for and to wait till it's in front of me to say that it's there, to say like, okay, but you know what? I don't even think that anyone really knows what to expect and what that means. Like I don't know. Just from a philosophical and intellectual sense, like I don't know. There's always some variation, throughout religions, throughout cultures, throughout throughout history of some kind of end of days transformation, transformational human experience. And obviously, being, Orthodox, being religious, or being Jewish, you have our perspective, and but we don't really ever go into what is supposed to happen. Just like the notion that something is supposed to happen, and you'll kind of know what it is when it happens. And I don't really even know what I would even come to expect. Like, does does Mashiach, does Messiah, does redemption mean like, Bibi Netanyahu? Like, I don't know, like, like what's going to happen? Are we magically just going to be transported to somewhere else, or is there going to be an actual step by step evolutionary development that happens to man, or some kind of extra, miraculous, I guess, world changing event that just is totally beyond nature, within nature? Like there's so many different
So I'm
questions to
I'm not
think
a
about.
believer in any of that stuff.
Okay, so what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of ironic because I had this. I generally wouldn't even bring up Mashiach because I'm such a cynic when it comes to human nature. I I,
Hmm.
I believe I believe in the beauty of people and that people are inherently good, but I also believe that um, we will continuously let down God, and
Yeah,
so we're kind of doomed to repeat the past, which is we make a stupid mistake and God punishes us, and we you know ask forgiveness, and God forgives us, and
right,
we have this this sine curve of happiness and sadness and success and tragedy throughout the Jewish history, and I happen to have been in a class with this rabbi who's very I mean, he's very learned. He's not one of the guys that I generally go to speak to because um, I'm just not a huge fan of his delivery. But he's very learned, and he's one of the Aish rabbis. And his talk today was about Mashiach,
okay.
and and I was playing the devil's advocate the entire night, the entire
Oh
time.
boy. Okay, how do you like
Um,
that?
I loved it. I had so much fun, and he was so thankful. He's like that is the most interactive and entertaining class that I've had in weeks. So
Awesome.
he was really. I felt great about it. Um, but my point was that all of the things that are going to occur that are going to bring Mashiach, or I mean the whatever occurs to bring Mashiach, right? Whatever those things are, I do believe they exist. I believe that because I believe that the Torah is real. I believe that it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai and over the course of the next 40 years in the desert. And and I believe that we have the same Torah that we've had that entire time. I mean, those things have to, in order to have honest faith in Judaism, I think those things, have to be cohesive. So
Sure.
what I don't buy into is the magic and mysticism that's going to occur. I think that there's a lot of metaphor involved. When they say that we'll be transported magically on the wings of birds, uh,
Yeah,
you know,
Kanfei
uh,
Nesharim. Yeah, and the wings of an eagle.
yeah, exactly, the
You
wings
know,
of an
you
eagle.
know the story with the Yemen. I think it
It's
was the
El Al,
Yemenite
man.
Jews.
El Al is the wings of the eagle.
I was
I
that's so
mean,
that's so funny that you say that, because I forgot. I think it was the Yemenite Jews. That it wasn't my grandmother's Yemenite, and her family came. Her family came from Yemen. She was actually the only one of her, I think, one of the only ones of her siblings, if not the only one, born in Israel. But her family came pre-48, while it was still under the British Empire, and all her siblings were actually soldiers in the British army, and then once Israel became a state, the Israeli army. But but I think it was. I don't think her family did not get this experience. They traveled, I think, through the desert and like on camelback to get to Israel. But but there was a plane that came, and apparently all these Middle Eastern Arab Yemenite Jews never really saw a plane before, and they were all convinced that like this enormous thing, flying thing that was there to take them to Israel was like the Messiah, and like and on one hand, it was like the most beautiful thing in the entire world. On the other hand, it was heartbreaking when they realized that it wasn't, and what
Right.
they were getting to was far from what they thought, it was gonna the promises historically were gonna be. Um, and yeah, I don't, I have a hard time with that, with the mysticism as well.
Well, here's my
But
point. What's going to be the time of Mashiach? It's going to be peace on earth, right? I mean, that's what they talk about. Peace on earth. Everybody gets along. So my point was that why does that have to be miraculous? I mean,
it doesn't
the
have to be.
more the more that if you just think about it from a logical perspective, the more that people have similar belief systems, right?
Hmm.
If 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 there are things out there that aren't causing massive discord, right? And right now we feel we have this sense of polarization that's so great in America and Israel that
The whole world,
you just
really.
the whole world, you just
Because the
can't.
media connects us. Like our phones connect us far more than we realize.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
for sure.
true. And I think that technology, by the way, is one of the things that's going to help bring Mashiach.
I,
Um,
I, I was about to say that. I want to hear what you have to say about that, and I'll tell you what I think first. I'll tell you after.
so so my point was that the point that I made this morning in the class was that the more we people start to understand that there is an inherent good and that people are either right or wrong, right? Because everyone believes they're right, and
Right.
that's part of the thing that causes polarization. But when there is an overreaching good that 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 everyone buys into, um, at that point, that's when it says that the people of the world will latch on to the Jewish nation to become their teachers,
Hmm.
and I feel like it's it's an impossibility that can't happen eventually.
You don't think so?
Because no, I really don't. I think that the longer a war like this goes on, the more that we distance ourselves from the need to be approved, the more support we're going to get from the world. And then when the world agrees with us, I mean, you even look at what's happening in Gaza, where the polls are showing that the Gazans are they're not buying into what the Hamas is saying any longer. That
Right.
they're something like 29% of the people approve of their agenda, when it was just months ago it was in the 70s. And
Right.
so they've taken a complete flip, and I don't think that's because we haven't been bombing them consistently. I just think that they're realizing that these people are self-centered egotists who have an agenda that does not better the
Well, they also
people.
know that they also know that the war could be over if Hamas decided to just, from my understanding, if Hamas decided to get back the captives and say, okay, we're taking a step back, you guys win, and if we cared about our people, if we cared about the people we're supposed to be governing,
But that's the point.
then
That's
yes,
exactly
of
my
course,
point.
you're right. I understand that. I am a little more skeptical to what you're saying, not from my perspective, but I actually think that, from based on what, and this could be not correct, but based on the content, I tend to consume a good amount of content. and I tend to consume a good amount of media, and I try to consume more moderately media in general. Like I don't like a lot of I don't like extreme left or extreme right, and I tend
Right.
to gravitate towards moderate material.
I try not to read the news
Right.
at all.
I definitely don't read the news. That's not anything I go near. But
Yeah.
what moderate what the rational American voice for the most part seems to be saying, unfortunately, and not in a good way for Israel, is they're associating this war, and or they're looking at it in a similar light to the Russia-Ukraine war, which is basically just America kind of prompting another war along to keep the war machine going and to just keep us sending money, without asking any questions to our quote unquote allies. And Israel is almost in the same boat as the way that they look at Ukraine in that sense, because they're like, listen, they're just an ally that we're just sending, hundreds of millions and of weapons and, dollars to, and how long is this going to go on for, and what's the point, and do we have to back them up for everything? And then and even the coverage I've heard on multiple podcasts from, again, people that they might they're not avowed, like they don't claim to be any kind of authorities, but people listen to them one way or another. And they and like when they were talking about the exploding pagers and beepers, there was no mention that it was to specifically Hezbollah terrorist members, right? It was just like, oh, Israel's blowing people up in Lebanon now, like. And I think the fact that that we've been in a war for so long makes the rest of the world skeptical as to why we're still in the war at all, right? And the answer is very simple. They have, first of all, I think that the Lebanon is kind of preemptive, even though there are thousands and thousands of families in the north of Israel that have been displaced because of the rockets. And so that's already, you wouldn't even necessarily even call that, preemptive. It's more retaliatory. But on the other hand, um, I just am about to lose my train of thought. I feel like I feel it slipping away. But the question just is like, how long is this going to go on for? And do we have to support this every single step of the way? And they're kind of getting tired of it. And I'm afraid that American support for Israel from the left and now from the more moderate at perspective is going to be dying down and withering away in a way that I don't think is is going to be too kind for the next 5-10 years towards Israel. I think that Israel actually is, I think we're going to see a rise in a lack of support and pushback to Israel in the next 5-10 years from a lot of people in America, because they're looking at Israel almost like a war machine. Like, first we start with Hamas. Again, we did not start, but first the war with Hamas, and then the war with Hezbollah, and then maybe eventually Iran. You never know. And then once Iran happens, it's full on World War III, and and for what? But um, that's
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree. What I would what I
it
would
makes me
say,
nervous. It scares me a little bit. A lot of it,
yeah,
just as a Jew, and the truth is that if I was a hundred
that's I mean
percent
that's part of the
American,
reason we're making Aliyah, honestly,
sure, sure, because
because
if I was only American and I was not Jewish and I was not deeply connected and emotionally invested and culturally invested, and my entire life is tied up with Israel and Judaism, if I was just a pure blood American, I wouldn't want America involved in any wars, like other than a war that we were directly involved in, like as in a proper, World War II kind of situation should have been the last war that America should have been in, hypothetically. You know, um, the rest of them we didn't really need to be in, and we subsequently lost for the most part. So, if I was just an American and not at all associated with Judaism or Israel, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want America to be involved in this.
yeah, I definitely hear that.
I don't know that, but
And I empathize with it because I've been a for many many years a staunch nationalist with libertarian tendencies, and
really,
so yeah, I've never
I didn't
been a
know that.
I've never been a member of the Republican Party, and
Wow,
yeah,
that's cool.
no,
How old are you? How old are you when that whole phase happened?
probably mid to late 20s.
Get out of here. What got you started? You want to tell me about that?
Not really.
Okay.
I hate talking. I hate talking about politics. I got into Israeli politics not because of, um, it's something I'm interested in because I steer away from that conversation as well. Even when people, it's on the tip of everyone's tongue here.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's hard to be at a Shabbos table and not contribute in some way,
Right.
at least with your opinions on what's going on. But
Sure.
we were talking about Mashiach, and
Yes.
I had been in a class, and that's how we
Yes.
got into this whole track.
Okay. So let's go back to that. Let's circle back to
Right.
that because we still have a lot more to
So
talk about with that.
yeah, I just my feeling is that we're going to, regardless of what happens with the war or with the American sentiment, I believe that there's going to be, based on based on occurrences in the world, whether they be related to this war or other wars, or just global warming, or any kind of medical discoveries. Just think, I was just having this incredible conversation with a guy who was whose father's I don't know if he's a Nobel Prize winner, but he won something equivalent to the Nobel Prize for medicine.
Okay.
Um, and and we were just talking about chemical concepts,
Hmm.
and he was describing the way this new drug that he has patented affects the body, and I was mesmerized because it was so incredibly fascinating for a nerd like me. Um,
Right.
but my point was that things like that are coming out of Israel, and I believe that I know that people associate Israel with Jews, and I
Hmm.
believe that overall, whether it happens in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years,
Hmm.
God provided us with a definitive right and wrong,
Right.
and and we are the only group of Jews that is consistently growing right now is Orthodoxy,
Yeah.
and because of
That's
that,
also a super interesting conversation, and I was listening to a couple of podcasts about that idea too, where, where different values lend themselves to. You could almost call it like social Darwinism, like certain values like more religious values tend to overcome um, secular values because there's just more emphasis on life and family and health and kids, and that's what just
and
allows
morality.
and morality, which allows the numbers to grow by three, four, 5 times. I mean, do you remember that? Yeah, you think about how many more religious Jews there are in Israel today than there were 50 years ago. I mean, the number is
It's
staggering. I think it's
staggering.
2 or 3 times more.
Yeah,
Like
I think it's more than that. It's more than that.
I think
I'm
at
sure.
first, I remember, I have to look it up. I
I
remember
thought it was three or four times, three or
it
four
was,
times
my understanding was
in the last
that I think the
generation.
average class had 13, I think in the 80s or 90s, I think it was maybe 13% Orthodox, or more religious, whatever you want to call it, whatever boundary you want to call it. And then by today, or by maybe 2015 or something like that, it was like 78%. Like from 13% to 78% or something.
Yeah,
Those are ballpark numbers, but it just shows you like that.
it's
Even if
staggering.
you're,
It's
yeah, it's
staggering.
staggering. It's breathtaking.
And so that being said, there's we're going to have that much more impact. Israel and Jews have always had a huge impact with this, not just in spite of the size of our people, right? But
Hmm.
it's like, be, in regardless of the size of our people, we have an amazing impact on the entire geopolitical atmosphere of the world, uh, with regards to not just politics but medicine, and
Right. Where do you think all the conspiracy
technology,
theories come? Where do you
and
think all the conspiracy theories about the Jews come from? It comes from somewhere, you know?
right, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and I believe that our success is one of the ways that God shows that we're the chosen people, and I believe that that success it has to, at some point there has to be a turning point where it begins to breed goodwill from the masses.
Yeah, you hope. You hope.
I would hope.
You really hope.
And but it's not just hope, because that's where I think God tweaks the scale a little bit. You know, he turns that knob a little bit and says, "Okay, everybody, look, here's yet another contribution to the Jewish world, because that's just so they notice us. And now that they're noticing us, oh, look, we are the most moral group of people in the world. And the reason that is because God gives us our morals. And there is a definitive right and wrong in the world. And when more and more people start to believe that definitive right and wrong, what happens is when you have agreement, you have less disagreement. And so that sense of less disagreement will bring in a natural, you know, peace time that could usher in the time of Mashiach.
So,
Oh, just based on agreement and
yeah.
understanding of
Yeah,
a
just based on
consistent moral
having
code.
universal values. Just universal values.
That's right, universal values, and it doesn't have to be identical values, right?
Sure.
I mean, we share a lot with the Far East, even though they believe in polytheism, and we brought monotheism to the world. We share a lot of values of morality with them,
Sure.
and with the Western world, we share the modern values of monotheism and politics and capitalism on some level.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and so I think that we'll find enough common ground worldwide to be able to usher in a time of peace. And um, I think it's going to be more organic. I don't think it has to be miraculous.
I I completely agree with you. Regarding a lot of what you're saying. Tell me what you think of this. I'm not sure what I think of this myself yet, but I'm curious what you think. I think I'm playing around with the idea. I actually ran it through a couple of people that know a lot more than I do, just in terms of Judaism, philosophy, and life overall. I was asking, what do you think? Like, do you think that aside from it's going to a combination of AI and our ability to in the future to be able to separate and um, to separate our consciousness from our physical bodies, right? So basically keep the spiritual aspects of ourselves. Now I don't know how we're going to do that, but it's really interesting because what's the Hebrew year now? We're in like five
57,
seven. What?
84.
5784. There's been tradition for thousands of years that the world is either going to end or restart by the year 6000, right? As in, like, either we're going to have redemption or the world's going to restart. We don't even know what that means, right? But 6000 seems to be like the magic number in Judaism. That means that we're 5784. That means that we're just a couple hundred years away, based on the
Well,
pace that things.
there's actually machlokas about that. I just learned about this morning. We were talking about this in this class.
Okay.
That there's a machlokas, that there's another school of thought that has, it's a minority opinion, that says that those are not the numbers, that the actual number that we're at, because we don't have, nowhere is it written the actual year that nowhere is it written the actual year in the Torah. right? People do the math and
Mm-hmm.
they figure out the math in different ways. But the actual year is not written. We don't know the year of creation. So
Right.
what we do know is that there's definitely in Kabbalah it's brought down that that year 6,000 is the year that if we don't bring Mashiach ourselves, God will bring it for us. That's what happens.
Either
So
that or the, either that or the. It's so interesting. There's so many different ways to go with this, but either
yeah,
that or the return to what we call tov vavohu, right?
right, yeah.
Which is conceptually speaking, just means chaos, right? And it's really interesting because basically, and we do know this about life
It
and
could
the
be a full
world.
reset.
Yeah, but what's a full? So I don't know that full reset means a full reset in that sense. It means, the way that, one of the right, Rashi, right, one of the Jewish commentators, says that the response, the first thing was that the world was called tohu vavohu, was chaos, and then Nachmanides or Ramban says that that whole period of tohu vavohu was actually the point of that. That was when all of evolution happened, and he actually describes like a germ, or like this tiny tiny microorganism, and he talks about how, through a series of chaos and developments and just collisions and, just the muddling up of everything throughout time, and there's no set period of time because it's just a process. Um, that that he basically equates that to evolution, and then Rashi says that he's French. What year did he live again? Do you remember off the top of your head? What year Rashi was around?
Was it 700 something? No, 1100 something.
1100 maybe. Well, he says that what that meant was that humanity and consciousness is what brought order to the chaos of the world. We looked at the chaos of the world. We looked at animals. We looked at nature. We looked at everything, and we said, we got to be the eyes of the world. This famous Grateful Dead song, right? We're gonna be the consciousness that is going to make sense and order of things, right? But if we don't have our guiding light, if we don't have our guiding perspective, if we don't have
Hmm.
God in our lives, and we reject that, then we see what humanity is capable of without that kind of sense of guiding light. Then we ourselves are very much subject to confusion, to abuse, to terrible, terrible things that make no sense that we can justify to ourselves and rationalize to ourselves over and over and over and over again, ad infinitum until we end up killing ourselves, So if we don't get to the point where we do reach that ultimate kind of good, that moral value, like what we're talking about, technology is going to keep on developing, people are going to keep on developing, weapons are going to keep on developing, and if we don't find a way to kind of get along, then what can ultimately happen is this return to a lack of any kind of cohesive perspective and unifying perspective and morality and our ability to look at the world and be like, this makes sense and this doesn't, and this needs this to grow and this needs that to grow and this needs this to develop for life to keep on growing on. And I mean, at the end of the day, we don't really know what the whole purpose of all of this is, other than to keep on advancing and to keep on it's Judaism is the pursuit of life. It's the pursuit of that's what Abraham, that's what Avram, that's all he cared about was just helping life along and just helping it evolve and pursue it. And he didn't have an end goal. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where. I mean, you can't know where life is going to go, and you can't know how. If you and I are good friends and I help you, and you and I rely on each other throughout our friendship to help each other grow and succeed in whatever endeavors that we partake in. We don't know. I don't know how you're going to end up, and you don't know how I'm going to end up. We just know that we're helping each other along the way and get there, right? But we don't know what we're going to be like at the end of our relationship, at the end of our lives. We just know we're going to do our best to help one another get there the best way that we could, right?
For
I think
sure.
that's what a lot of this is all about. I really, really do believe that. And I think that if you have this sense of I know I'm committed to relationships, and I know I'm committed to, a certain sense of having certain values, and I have a certain animalistic pull that has been millions and millions of years of being developed and worked on, right? That just like I need to like I just see, like there's just certain physical traits that attract one member of one sex to another. Then then even then you feel then there's a pull that's millions of years old that just tugs at you, and you need your brain and you need your values and you need your morals to tell you, hey, shut up. This is not the time. This is not the place. This is not what your life is. And there's something more important than this pull right now. It's an evolution of consciousness as opposed to your body, you know? And I think that's what a lot of this is all about. It's about the evolution
Well,
of consciousness to get us to the next phase in whatever life is.
Well, I want to touch on two things that you mentioned. First of all, I want to just finish the comment that I was making earlier, which is that there is a machlokas that actually this was new to me, that we're not in 5784, but we're in 5930, which is
Oh
only,
no, 70
yeah, I
years.
know. Yeah, 70
Holy
years. So
crap, that's
I
crazy.
know. I know. So I was like, and it's a, like I said, it's a minority opinion, but it's an actual, I mean, it's something that's talked about. Like
You got
it's
to
a
take that
legitimate,
seriously. You got
it's
to
a
think about it.
legitimate opinion in the Gemara. So anyway, that's scary. The second thing is that, um, there, I was at another shiur this morning. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday, it kind of all bleeds together. But there's this one of my probably my favorite rabbi that I love going to his classes, is a guy by the name of Dov Ber Cohen. You would love him, by the way. You would absolutely love him. He
Yeah?
has
What about
forum
him?
online. You can find him on, wait, let me think of what's his website? Um, I have it written down. I'll
Okay,
I'll
text
give
it
it
to
to
me.
you. I'll give it to you later. But he is he just a quick bio. He's a guy who was soul searching, and in his 20s went to the Orient for like 6 years and traveled around to all different countries. He studied Buddhism, Hinduism, and was like teaching English to monks, to like Buddhist monks,
So
and
cool.
was was training in martial arts, so which I have a passion for.
Do you? I
And
didn't even know that.
you didn't know that? Oh man, I've
Oh,
trained in
dude.
martial
You know
arts.
why? Because I only got into UFC towards the tail end before we hung of us. Before I moved out of South Florida. So I don't think you and I ever got a chance to talk about it. But I mean, I'm a huge UFC fan nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I started really learning how to fight when UFC first came about.
No
Um,
way.
yeah, that I
What'd you
mean, I used to
do?
watch. I used to watch Hoist Gracie fight.
Wow.
Who's? Do you know who that is?
He was on. I think he was on
All right.
Rogan's podcast a couple of times.
Yeah, yeah. He's one of the OGs of UFC, and so Um, yeah, so I trained primarily in Muay Thai. That was my art form,
Nice.
which is just a vicious art
Yeah.
form that used a lot of elbows and knees and
So by the way,
shins.
next in like a week and a half, a guy named Khalil Roundtree is fighting, and he's a heavyweight. I think he's maybe a light heavyweight. He's I think 205 or 210. He kind of fluctuates, and he went to Thailand to learn Muay Thai, and he's the biggest guy that I've ever seen move the way he does. Like he's so light on his feet, and
Yeah,
he's so quick. It's
yeah,
astounding. It's really incredible.
yeah. Well, I mean, when I was competing, I was fighting at just under that weight. I was probably at 190.
Hmm.
Um, and I was a pretty good fighter. I
Wow.
won more than I lost.
I wish I was a fighter, dude. I don't I if I got if someone tried starting a fight with me, I would look scary because I'm 6'3", I'm 6'4", 6'3", and
Yeah,
then I would
yeah,
turn around and I would run my 6.5 minute mile as quickly as I could, dude. I mean, I would
yeah.
be out of there.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't really fought since I stopped competing when I was 28.
Hmm.
But I, you know, I, pra- but I, played, I was fairly consistent until I was about 35 in training and stuff. But I stopped fighting basically when my wife was pregnant with our first child,
Gotcha.
and she was just tired of me coming home with broken noses,
Oh
and
my God, really? You'd have broken
yeah,
noses?
9 times. Broke my nose 9 times. I
Holy
had to get surgery.
crap, dude.
I had so much I had so much like scar tissue inside my nose that I had one nostril completely closed and the other one was just it was at like 30%
Oh my
open. It was like
goodness.
70% occluded. And
So you're not
and I
afraid
could
to get punched in the face anymore?
barely breathe. No, I don't know. I mean, it's like I said, I haven't taken a punch in the face in 15 years. Um, but, or no, longer than that. I mean, I haven't, probably longer than that. I mean, I was still training, but I wasn't really fighting. I was wearing, you know, wearing protective gear.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and she's pushed me in a wheelchair 3 times for broken toes and feet, and
Oh
you know,
my
I've
God.
broken a few bones in my feet several times. Uh, One
That's
time I broke my
crazy.
shin. Yeah, 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 and
Did you love
ribs.
it? You loved it though?
I loved it. I loved it. It was when you're good at something, you love it. You know what I mean? I loved football too. I loved football. I still love football. Um,
Right. Are you one of those?
but
Are you
it's
one of those guys that stay up all night to watch football now? Because you're 7 hours ahead.
So I will during the playoffs. I've been going. So I met a group of guys that rented um, a, like a workspace, you know, an
Hmm.
office basically, and turned it into a man cave.
Nice,
And they meet Sunday night and watch 2 games. So 8 p.m. and 11 p.m.
nice.
Is the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock game. And so we watch 2 games a week. But any more than that, everything is like super late. So, but during the playoffs, I would probably stay up to watch the championship games and the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
Um,
those always fun.
yeah,
It
they've been
ruins your whole day, but it's cool.
yeah, maybe worth it.
Yeah, I think
It's
so. Listen, I mean, if you love it and you do it a couple
yeah,
times a year, who gives a crap?
yeah,
So
exactly,
anyway,
exactly.
so you're saying so about this guy Dove Bear
Yeah,
Cohen, is that
Dope
his
Bear
name?
Cohen. So,
Yeah.
um, I was just saying how he presented this idea of consciousness, how consciousness is the only thing that scientists cannot explain away.
Yeah.
Everything else, if even if they're wrong, right, which they are
Hmm.
about many things, even if they're wrong, they at least have explanations other than, you know, where did the first particle come from? Where did the first piece of matter come
Right.
from that started all the rest of the matter in the Big Bang?
Hmm.
What, you know, that's one question. And then the other question is how does matter, how can matter create con- consciousness? So there's this, I don't know, I don't read books on atheism because I don't buy into it and I'm not interested in it. And I have no need to debate people over theology. It's religion and politics, two things I stay away from
Hmm.
as far as debate is concerned. But I enjoy listening to it, right? So, and I love listening to a good debate.
Sure.
And so this guy brought up all of these, you know, the one of the renowned atheists who I really appreciated what this guy had to say. I think his name is Ken Harris.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, you're not talking
Something
about what's his
Harris.
name? Sam
His,
Harris.
his last name's Harris.
It's Sam Harris is one of the most
Sam
famous
Harris.
atheists in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sam Harris. So
Okay.
he was speaking and talking about. I mean, he gave. We watched a short video presented by him, and it was beautifully presented, and I loved it, and I love his outtake on the
He's so
world. I mean,
smart.
he
He
is.
doesn't.
He's
He
so
doesn't. He,
smart.
I don't believe I don't think he believes. I believe it's him. I don't think he believes in free will. By the way,
I don't know.
he believes in that he believes that you essentially are such a strong product of your a combination of the nature and the nurture that you're in, that you essentially it's essentially impossible to rise above what you've been born into, and he
Oh,
makes the
there are
argument that it's
so
that
many
you can't.
countless examples that can throw that theory, out of the water.
I know,
That
but he's
doesn't
a
make any.
smart guy. I'm sure he's considered a lot of that. You know.
Yeah, he is. He's a very smart guy, and even he could not. I mean, he calls consciousness right, the whole idea that he says that consciousness is the greatest thing in the entire world. It's what it's what brings people together. It's what causes relationships. It's what causes
Sure.
growth and fosters development and invention. And it's just, I mean, his. I loved his delivery. His delivery was so good. It made me want to go listen to his shtussim. You know
You
what I'm
should,
saying?
by the way. He's a smart. Listen. Everyone has intelligent and wise. Not everyone, but a lot of people in this
A lot
world
of, yeah, no,
have
he's he's
a
very, very
lot of
bright.
valuable things to offer. You know.
100%. But like I said, I don't like personally debating
Sure.
theology because I guess I don't feel strong enough to and I have my own personal beliefs, and if you don't believe in them, I'm fine with that because as I've said, I subscribe to libertarianism, right? You do
Uh-huh.
you as long as it doesn't affect me. I'm
Right.
totally happy with you being happy with who
Right.
you are. And
Right.
as long as it doesn't affect me, I think I'm more power to you. So um, that's like that's is I feel as strongly about that as I do about my belief in Judaism.
Really.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, a lot of that conflicts with a lot of the things that I believe in Judaism, and so I have cognitive dissonance, and it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating because I often say things and I know that I believe, and they're completely against what I'm supposed to believe because I'm Jewish, and
I
so
don't know if that's necessarily true about it. I bet if we got down to the roots of a lot of it, I don't think as much of it would be as different
I
as you
I
would
I
think.
I like to think that also. I really do. That's the reason that I don't have these debates because I don't know enough about Judaism. I just don't know enough. I'm not well versed enough to understand why my belief systems are not dissonant, you know?
Hmm.
So, but my point was that even Sam Harris said that um, consciousness, I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's almost a quote. Consciousness is the greatest thing that that can be found in this world, in the universe, the
Yes.
greatest thing in the universe,
Hmm.
and it's something that we have to collectively ignore with regard to um, creation, like the where it came from, because we have no way to determine, you
That
know,
is the okay. I can I
we have
here
no way to know
I'm
how it
trying to
came
figure out the
about.
nicest way to say it. I'm trying to figure out the nicest and most charitable way to put this, right? That to me feels almost like you don't want like a path that you don't want to start going down because you're afraid that it might lead you to an answer that you don't like. You know, to me, like
But
to say,
that was exactly the point that Dov Ber Cohen was making in his shir, that he had to say this because he has no answer for it. He has no. He says it's the greatest thing in the universe, and it's the thing that makes us human, and the thing that fosters, everything human, the growth and
sure,
development, and
yeah.
and,
And
and
if you're really such an intellect, then part of your responsibility as an honest intellect, or if you're really looking to seek the truth, is to not stop short of a difficult question like that and say we can't even think about it because we don't know where it might lead us.
yeah. I
That
mean, you could look
that's
you could
something
look
that
it
you
up and
say.
find it. this was him talking himself. This wasn't paraphrasing.
Yeah,
This
no, I
wasn't
believe it. I
quoting.
believe it.
I watched the video. It was shocking. And
Right,
he's like, this guy is known as the greatest atheist on the planet.
right.
Like,
Sorry, Richard
like
Dawkins.
I don't know.
You
I
know,
don't know. I'm just saying,
you never
like,
heard of Richard Dawkins?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah,
I'm
he's a
sure.
guy.
I believe I did
He
he
used to
like debate
debate.
rabbis and stuff?
He used to debate Jonathan Sacks quite a bit.
Yeah. I've seen that debate with Jonathan Sachs
Yeah.
or
Which,
heard.
the world. By the way, the world really misses him because, good heavens,
Yeah, yeah. Talk about a
that guy.
smart man.
Aside from being a smart man, that guy was so incredible at bringing people together and using and his command and his nuance over the English language was so great that people that would listen to him would he would tell you something that whether you agreed with or not, he put it in such a way that you couldn't that you'd have a hard time saying like that even if you disagreed that you didn't like what he was saying or that like it had no validity or anything to it. You might say I don't
I
subscribe to
kind of
that.
feel like you can make that argument on some level for everyone with a British accent.
Unless you're British,
Yeah,
and then you're not as charmed
right. I
by
know
the
it's
whole
true.
crew. But yeah, I definitely am I'm a victim to that for sure.
Yeah. It's hard not to be. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
yeah. So I think the world misses him because he would have been great to have, especially in this point in history. With all the wars and everything going on in the world, and just the way that the world's treating each other and looking at each other. He was such an advocate for peace and such an advocate for respect to other people, and he would have, and it wasn't just empty love and enthusiasm. It was really, really, really. Um, it had the emotional and intellectual appeal and content, all together, all at once. It was really amazing.
yeah,
I
and
really
yet
miss him.
I miss him too, and I loved his I loved learning from him, but I've I I've come across so many people who just didn't like his thought he was too controversial about things
Really?
or didn't. Yeah, I mean,
Jonathan
he
Sachs?
yeah, Jonathan Sachs.
What was he
I don't
controversial about?
know. I don't know. I think these are people who are very grounded in the yeshiva world, and I think that maybe Jonathan Sachs, who is more accepting of of Jews because they're Jews than a lot of people in the yeshiva world. They call them Haredim here.
Hmm.
Um, I think that I felt like that they were hopeful that because he's such a powerhouse in the Jewish world and has such a powerful motivational voice, they wanted him to kind of fall in line with their belief system.
Right. Well, so that's not disagreeing with him or being controversial because what he says is controversial. That's because you want him to say what you want him to say.
Right,
That's not necessarily the same thing.
right. I
Like,
hear. Right. But that's what I
yeah,
meant. That's what I meant when I said
right,
controversial.
right. So, I want to hear some thoughts now, and dive into a little bit about education because I've talked a lot about education on the podcast, both
What do
from
I
my
know
own
about
experience.
education?
Well, what do you know about education? Why don't you tell me what you know about education? You started as a teacher and you became a principal, right?
Yeah,
Is that what it was? And you
yeah.
did it for
I
what,
mean,
20
I
years? 15
started
years?
as I started. Actually, didn't start as a teacher. I started teaching as a an alcohol and substance abuse counselor.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, that was my first kind of
Good.
dive into education, where I got up in front of a classroom. There was in New York State. I don't know if you're. I mean, I know you're from New York, but I don't know if you're familiar with this law. that if you're convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol,
Hmm.
which in New York State they actually call driving while intoxicated, as a
Yeah.
different rule on the books,
DWI. DWI.
DWI instead of DUI.
Mm.
And so if you get what we called a DWI at the time, they take away your driver's license and first offense. They take away your driver's license, and
Sure.
you're entitled to get a conditional driver's license that allows you to drive to and from work, pick up your family from school, and drive to and from the grocery store. And that's pretty much it. Um, and
How
it's
does anyone enforce that? How's that
during
enforced?
daylight hours. During daylight
Ah,
hours.
okay.
And so, how do they enforce that? It's a the only way you can get this conditional license is by taking a prescribed educational course where the curriculum is set by the state of New York, and it's
Hmm.
taught in licensed uh, programs, licensed schools. And I worked for one of these schools called Sunrise Services
How'd you end up teaching
in
there?
Rockville Center. So um, I ended up teaching there because I was qualified to teach because I had gotten my certified alcohol and substance use counselor's degree out
You
of
got your
South
what? Sorry, you
Oaks.
cut out. Which degree?
It was a CASAC, Certified Alcohol and Substance Abuse Counselor. It's a 6-month program that you take, and it's a program of study, and you have it. Then there are tests at the end, and it's a licensure that you get for
Why did you
being
decide to do that? You just
through
thought
the
it'd be
course of
fun?
study. So I wanted to do that because um, there are a number of reasons. You know, I was an EMT in college, and this was right after college.
Okay.
And when I was an EMT, I saw a lot of needless accidents involving drugs and alcohol, and that was part of it. Um, the other part of it was that I wanted to teach in this program that I was telling you about because the hourly rate was really good, and it was my father's program.
Oh,
So
nice. Okay.
that was the kunst that I was trying to avoid. I was actually qualified, and I was actually, I had experience, and my dad was the owner of the program, and so that's why I got the interview. But I had to teach. I really did teach, and I was one of the better teachers there. I stayed on for a long time. I did it throughout the 8 years that I taught in New York City. I was working there as well, part time. But that was my first kind of venture into education. And then um, I was originally pre med, and because I did a year in Israel, these are all the stories that you've never heard. I have to tell you all this stuff.
Yeah, I never heard any of this stuff. How old are you at this point? Because you didn't. This wasn't right after high school, right? Is this after
No,
college?
this is after college. This is like kind of. I mean, it started during college because I took the CASAC while I was in college, and started teaching when I was I think I was maybe 19 or 20. Um,
Okay, that was before you were a flight attendant.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the flight
Okay,
attendant
so
thing
you.
I did after college.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Okay.
So, so during college, I went to I did a year overseas. I went to Israel um, as completely secular. I wasn't religious at all.
Hmm.
But I always felt a connection to Israel. I had gone on birthright. Um, and then the following when I was a sophomore, I went on birthright for like 2 weeks or something like that, and I was like, "That's it. I want to go spend a year there." And I did an exchange program through SUNY,
Oh, cool. Really?
yeah, at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, down south of
Wow,
Gaza.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
Okay, that's a crazy
it
place
was
to spend a
great.
year.
It was great. It wasn't a full year because I was on football scholarship, so I had to play the season or I'd lose my scholarship. I
Wow.
was, yeah, by the way, that job, that company that my father owned, that was the only, that it didn't make any money. And it was the only thing that he had because he had lost his main job when I was my senior year of high school. So I was doing everything I could to pay my way. I took student loans and was working 2 jobs, and that was one of them. And I was also a bartender. as you know, and and then I did well, when I was in Israel, I I was working as a personal trainer in the university gym, um,
Cool.
making
Good money.
making 25 shekel an hour
And you divide that at the time probably by
by
three
by
or
like
four,
four.
by like
Yeah, by
four.
four, between four and five. It was like 4.5.
That's
So I
that's
was making about
crazy.
$5 an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
yeah, but it was okay money. You know what I mean? Like for what
Sure.
I
Yeah, you got
needed,
along. Yeah.
it was something. It was something. So so I was taking all these classes, and they were all classes that I needed to graduate. And when I came back, the actual program was through Albany. It wasn't through Stony Brook, even though I was a student at Stony Brook. And I had been accepted to the University Medical Center at Stony Brook for medical school. But because of that happened my junior year, I ended up 4 credits short. And I don't think it was because of football season, because I think that they were able to work something out with the credit transfers. I think it was something got lost in Albany, that for some reason Stony Brook accepted the course from Israel, because I was looking at the courses that I was taking in Israel, and I was like, well, Stony Brook take this, will Stony Brook take this, will Stony Brook take this, and I didn't bother to think, oh, will Albany take this, will Albany take this. And
Right.
so one of the classes wasn't accepted by Albany. I ended up 4 credits short, and
That
because of
happened to me
that,
with my history class, by the way. I took a history class, and it turns out for my prerequisite, it turns out that class was not necessary. And right before I graduated, the school was like, "Listen, like, like you're supposed to graduate in a month. Like, you need this class. Like, you need a history
that's
class." And I
exactly
took
what
it.
happened to me. It was
Hmm.
spring semester, my senior year. I had already registered for classes,
It's
and they come
crazy.
and tell me, "Oh, you're 4 credits short of graduating." And I was like, "Okay, I'll take an extra 4 credits." They're like, "No, you're already at 18 credits. We only allow a maximum of 21. So even if you took another 3 credits, you'd still be 1 credit short. You'd have to take a class over the summer." So because of that, even though you've been accepted, we're not going to deny your acceptance, but we have to defer it for a year.
Wow.
So they deferred my acceptance to med school for a year. And during that year, I started, well, at first I became a flight attendant, right? Because I wanted to
Okay.
travel. And then after
Was that
that,
scary
I
to
took,
do? Was it scary, like, to make the decision, like, I'm just gonna go and just like travel everywhere, or like it was more
no,
fun?
no, it was, I had a friend who was doing it, and she's the one who got me the interview. And it was honestly, still maybe the best year of my life. It was
Wow.
it was such an awesome time. And I was working for a wild airline, and we can talk about that a little bit later if you want to hear some stories. Um,
Definitely.
but with regard to education, so the way I got into education was because after flight attendant stuff happened, right before, um, right before uh, I was ready to start med school. It happened in like March. I was offered a position to fill in for a woman who was taking off because she was on maternity leave. And
Right.
so I was offered at, it happened to be, again, talk about nepotism, at my mother's school. My mother was the one who got me the job. It was a chemistry teacher, and because I had so many classes in chemistry, because I was pre-med, it was an easy thing for me to learn the curriculum and just step in her shoes and just start teaching. And that, one thing just led to another, and I just loved it. It was so freaking amazing.
So what do you so tell me what you think um hmm, the top some of the top most important things it takes to be a good teacher. Um and we'll start with that. What do you think it requires to be a great teacher, a great educator?
All right, so that depends on the the way that the type of student that you're looking to teach. They say that the best people go into elementary school education because they love working with children. And they say that people go into high school education because they love, and even more so, college education, because they love the curriculum that they've chosen, the study, the area of study that they've chosen. And they say that people go into middle school education because they're masochists.
Okay.
So it really depends. But to answer your
Let's say
question
high
more
school. Let's say
honestly,
high school.
to answer your question more honestly, it really takes preparation. You have to come prepared, and that's one of the things that I notice, and I hesitate to tell when I go to classes. You know, I hesitate to tell people that I have a doctorate in education and I was a high school principal for 14 years because um, a lot of times I'm very critical of their teaching style, of the way they give over information. And people present either inaccurate facts, and that comes from a lack of preparation, or they present opinions as fact,
Hmm.
which, in my opinion, also comes from a lack of preparation. Either that or dishonesty. And I don't want to believe that teachers
Or just being
um,
dishonest like that.
are
Right.
being dishonest because they have an agenda, right? I don't want to believe that. I know it's true in some cases, but that's not what I want to believe. I want to believe that it comes from a lack of preparation. Um, and then people are just unprepared, and their delivery is not well prepared because they haven't laid out a lesson plan, and they haven't studied methodology on how to give over a proper lesson, and how to that's the most important thing is preparation. The second most important thing, and this is true for everything that's not university. I won't even say college because this is even true in the smaller colleges and
Yeah.
community colleges. Classroom management.
Oh
Classroom
boy.
management.
It's
Classroom
tough.
management. It's called classroom management skills because there are skills. There
Yeah.
are skills and techniques that you can build and you can read up on and you can practice. And practice makes perfect. And you need to be able to control the environment that you're in. And control doesn't mean yelling, and it doesn't mean banging on your desk, and it doesn't mean disciplining
No, not
kids.
at all.
You know, control is understanding how to guide the conversation in such a way that it's productive and meaningful to the kids. The kids
Right.
are people don't understand that the classroom management is at least 50% of your success as a teacher. The other I
Right.
would I put the other 50% in preparation, but and then the other 50% is knowledge of your curriculum, and
Right.
probably the last 50% is is just being lucky and having students that are because the student body does, contrary to what what any um, te- you know teacher of teachers is allowed to tell you. The student population does have an effect on the quality of education, no
Right.
question.
Right.
I mean, one
Right.
one kid could ruin your entire year.
Ah, I
So
know that.
yeah, no, it's really true. Now there are ways to deal with that kid that are
One of the
productive.
best ways that I've found in my extremely, extremely limited experience, just from my own perspective, is to get is to hopefully get the kid to realize. I think kids largely, very overwhelmingly, a kid that does not that type of personality feels like the teacher is going to be inclined to dislike them, and to show the kid that you guys are on the same side and that you like one another and that you care and that you care about him and that all you want is what's best for him. From my experience, that has turned. Listen, it hasn't. It's not 100%. I don't know that there is such a thing as 100% flip around solution. That someone that has that has a history of having a hard time sitting in a classroom for an extended period of time, or studying in a conventional sense or anything like that, they're not going to change overnight. No matter what you do, pretty much. But the most success that I had, where I earned respect and from both the parent and the kid, um, and I've dealt with tough parents and kids so far, is just to say, like, listen, it's not me against your son, or it's not me against you guys. We all want the same thing. I want your son to do the best that he could, and you want your son to do the best he could. And this is what I'm picking up, and maybe I'm misreading it, and if I'm misreading it, tell me how I'm doing so. But um, but at the end of the day, to I mean, my teachers that I felt least inclined to try to work with were the ones that I felt didn't like me, or that I felt were kind of out to get me. Whether it's fair or unfair, and whether I gave them a reason to or not, I'm sure that you could divvy up the blame however you want. But and sometimes it was obviously more my fault and sometimes less. But I've never ever had a hard time with someone where I've said to them, all I want is the best for you and your kids, and I'm just trying to do that, from the way, just this is what I'm observing, and what can we do to work on it, and that has been such a successful technique, and that's all it really takes, from what I saw with a lot of people.
I would agree. I would agree that that showing kids that you love them, that you care about them, is extreme. I mean, it provides that desire for the kid to want to have a relationship with you. And
Yes.
if a kid wants to have a relationship with you, he's going to want to make you proud. And if he's going to want to make you proud, he's going to want to behave in class. And so, you know, you can also, I have found that the more adult you can treat a child, the more he will feel respected. And if a kid feels respected, he's more easy with giving respect, because kids don't just give respect. People have, demanded respect because of their position. You don't demand respect.
Yeah, it's
You
crazy.
can't you can't command respect.
It
You
drives me
have to
crazy
earn
when people try to demand it. When people
you have to
demand
earn
respect, when people
respect.
demand leadership, and also, and I've said this, a lot of times on my podcast already, but the
Respect
best
my
leaders are
authority.
the ones that don't want to be it, you know? don't want to be, they don't want to be the leaders. They're pushed into it, and the only reason why they're leaders is because they're just incredible at what they do. And so the world values that, you know? But the people that look to want to be the leaders, I want power over people. I want control. I want to be the one that tells everyone what to do. They're the worst leaders. I mean, and the people that command, that want respect. And my Saba used to say, he's saying Hebrew, the person that chases kavod or respect, respect runs away from him, and you're never going to catch up. Now,
Yeah,
granted, he
unfortunately,
loves
that's
respect
that's
himself.
every politician in America. So
That's every politician. I think almost every politician in the world. I mean,
yeah,
and I think there's a lot of, you know,
I don't know
um,
enough here about the
who
world
was it?
politics.
Brett Favre, or not Brett Favre? Who's the quarterback for the Jets now? That he tore his
Aaron
he tore
Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers. He's like, I don't think you should be a politician unless you do an ayahuasca retreat. But,
Right.
and I think there's value to that,
Did you hear
for
Brett
sure.
Favre was just diagnosed
Yeah,
with Parkinson's disease?
Parkinson's. Oh
I know,
my
it's crazy.
gosh,
I
it's
know,
so
I know.
sad.
I think there's going to be more of that, because there's a link. There's got to be a link to the amount of head hits you take. I'm scared of it for me. I mean, and I didn't take nearly enough the amount of damage that he took over the years. He had one of the longest
Hmm.
careers in the history of the NFL. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. I mean, I
it's
remember, I
19
remember
years.
my
I think
dad.
it takes 19
I was
years.
never a big football fan, but I do remember, growing up. Whenever I'd want to watch and spend time with my dad would always, like, because Brett Favre was he was on Green Bay, right?
Yeah, he
And
was he
was
played
he
before
taking
Aaron
over?
Rodgers.
Right. That's right. That's right. So my dad kept on talking about the transition from one quarterback to the next. I remember it being like a
Yeah,
legendary transition that lasted
it
forever.
was legendary, one of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
Maybe besides maybe Montana to Steve Young. I don't think that there's ever been another transition beside better than Brett Favre
Aaron
to
Rodgers.
Aaron
Crazy.
Rodgers. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing,
Incredible.
absolutely amazing. So anyway, back to education. I think that you have the whole. You're on the right track with showing love to the kids, and I don't the L word seems to be jaded in education today, but I don't see a problem with it.
The L word,
Um,
love.
yeah, love. Yeah, you can't love your students. I
Yeah.
don't know because it's not it's got a connotation to it that just isn't real. At least not in the Jewish world. You have to love your students. You have to, on some level, you have to feel love for them in order to
Absolutely.
really want them to succeed. That's the only way. You can't just care about them. You can't just like them. You have to honestly want what's best for them in order
Yeah.
for them to succeed. And the best teachers love their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like
You know what? I believe it's hard
it
not
does.
to.
You're losing that in public school. It's a dead animal. I mean, it doesn't. It's not. You never see it anymore.
I think you have to work hard to not love your students to a certain extent. Maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm silly, maybe I'm only, again, just a couple of years into it. But even the students that gave me a hard time, right? I have like there's something about the wholesomeness, the enthusiasm, the
Yeah, but
youthful.
don't you teach like fourth or fifth grade?
No, dude, I've been teaching ninth, 10th, and 11th.
Oh wow. Okay, good. That's
And
great to hear.
yeah, dude, but it really feels to me like I would have to like have a part of me really shut off to not at least if love if not admire, like there's something about, and one of my favorite things about teaching is especially kids I actually didn't want to teach high school, right? I wanted to teach college because I felt like high school kids weren't intelligent enough or emotionally mature enough, and I wanted to be able to connect on a certain
They're not.
level that what.
They're
They're
not.
not. They're not. Well,
They're
they are
definitely
and they're
not.
not in different ways, right? And I realize that what they're lacking is certain.
Intelligence, yeah, but emotionally mature.
Not
Yeah,
quite
not
right,
not until 11th grade at least.
right. But why not, right? And the part of them that kind of prevents that emotional maturity is raw and unbridled. Like they can't fake being interested in your class, right? Like kids can't do it. So that when they're passionate, when they're passionate and enthusiastic with their whole being, right? Like I could what I start holding myself responsible for classes that my students that my students don't behave in. Because I say, if I was doing a better job at this, they would love it. Like if I was doing a better job presenting this information, if I was better prepared, like you say, or if I chose a better topic that spoke to them more, and I've been, I don't ever have a set syllabus because I don't know what's going to speak to the kids or not. So I kind of work on what works with the class. I base it pretty much on the class and the reactions to it.
What school do you teach in? You teach in a Jewish school.
Yeah, in Torres Chaim in North Miami Beach,
Yeah,
and they
I
really give
hear.
me free reign, which is awesome. I
Yeah,
love
of
it.
course they do. It's a
But
yeshiva,
hmm but
and
my
there's
point
no
is
there's
that
no real supervision.
I have no supervision. I
I
mean,
know that.
and I love that, by the way. I think it's perfect for me because I'm not I'm not the teach. It's so funny. The principal kept on sending me text to do something called better I don't know, better teach or something like that. It's just like one of these like online generic like enhance your teaching skills courses, and he kept on asking me to do it, and I'm like, maybe later, maybe when I have time, I don't know, later on. And then at one point, like he sat me down. He's like, "Listen, you're not gonna do this." I'm like, "I'm not really gonna do it." And he goes, "Okay." He goes, "It's a shame." He goes, "But next year." He goes, next year I'm not going to pay for I'm not going to pay for for that extra teacher to do it. I know that you're just not going to do it. I'm like, listen, if you asked me before you bought it, I would have told you 100 times that there's no chance I'm ever taking that class. I'm ever taking those stupid generic online, PowerPoint videos. I just don't personally. It's not the way that I work, and
Yeah, you don't have to
education.
convince me.
What?
You don't have to convince me. I've seen enough of them.
Oh my God. I don't understand how anyone even sells those. I don't understand how I would pitch
You want to know why?
to
I'll tell you how. I'll tell you how why people sell them. It's very simple
who buys
because
them, I mean. I know who sells them. Who buys them?
I'll tell you exactly who buys them also.
Okay, let's hear
In
it.
public school, teachers are lazy. Administrators are glorified teachers in the public school system. So
Okay.
rather than do the work themselves to put together a proper, teacher planning session where you sit down and there's like development programs that are actually meaningful to the teachers and helpful and bring in qualified personnel. They buy what is easy and
Mm-hmm.
fast, and they don't have to do any work.
It's like the junk food of the education world.
It is. It is.
Right.
But that no,
Right.
that's not the junk food of education. It is education. That's how college professors are teaching these days.
I Don't get me started on that. I mean, the only thing that I could potentially say in their defense, hopefully, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, I don't know, is that college professors have dual responsibilities. Some is research and some is teaching, and they feel and a lot of the professors are more inclined to care about their research than they are about their teaching.
But I agree with you, and I also think it's generous. I think that's generous. I
Hello?
think that I'm very cynical about the state of public education in America today.
Yeah. Well, we know that it needs work, but so just to provide a little bit of context and background for you, just regarding the overall tone of the podcast and the conversation I want to have, right? Um, I started it. I started this because after the attempted Trump assassination, the first time, which is even crazy
Which
that I have to
one?
even
Which
say that.
one?
Yeah, which is insane that I even have to say that. Like, I mean, you're gonna go like. I hope that in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when people have calmed down about the name Donald Trump a little bit, that 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 we're going to look at this and make, I can't believe that we treated another human being, let alone a president of the United States this way, or an ex-president of the United States this way. Um,
You're
but,
breaking up. I can't hear anything you're saying. Can you repeat that?
yeah. So I said, rather than,
Hello?
hello, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got a really bad connection all of a sudden.
Is it me or is it you? It could be both of us, or it could be me, but I've been in the same place the whole time. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I haven't moved. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So anyway, so what I was saying was that after the attempted Trump assassination, I went online. I was listening to some podcasts and some clips as to what people's reactions were, and the reactions were overwhelmingly extreme, just extremely divisive and vicious, right? On both ends, meaning whether you were defending Trump or whether you were against him, and you were one of these crazy people online that were saying, well, he kind of almost
Yes, it
deserves it.
shows the polarization of America today.
Right. So I wanted to start. So that spurred me to want to start a podcast that is that we could talk about any kind of topic, but in a productive, healthy, non-divisive way where you can have because we used to be able to have conversations where you can agree or disagree with someone and be civil and be respectful and say what you say and not call anyone a Nazi or a fascist or anything like that, or not call anyone that's to the left a Marxist or a communist or whatever it is, and just to have a conversation and say, okay, like we're trying to solve the same issues in the world over here, and we have different takes how to do it, but I respect that, like we're both trying to accomplish that, right? and I don't know that there's enough media out there that does that, and that's why I wanted to start this podcast. That's why it's called Come Together. So when we say that I'm very cynical, we're very cynical about the state of American public education. You know, what's the most positive way, or the most charitable way to kind of think about the way that it could be resolved to go into the future about it? Do you think?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah,
Did I
I
lose you?
lost you again.
I said, what's the most charitable way do you
Yeah, no, I'm
think
here now.
that we could look at the state of education in America, and how do you think the most positive way we could go about it is?
Yeah, this app is not working well, man.
Yeah, that's a
I'm getting
shame.
like every
Hello?
third word.
Okay, fine. So do you want to call it here? We'll try to do this again another time. Hello?
Um, yeah, yeah, why
Okay.
don't we? Yeah, we've been
Okay.
on for an hour and a half. We can pick
Yeah, I
up
know.
here next time.
Okay. Let's pick up. We'll have a good.
All right, I'll talk to you
This is a
later,
ton of
buddy.
fun. We have so much more to go though. Thank you, dude. We'll be in touch. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay, be well.
All right, brother. Catch you soon. Bye. Bye, everyone.